Hey, Monarch students, this is Ms. Kurganin, and today we are going to follow along with this worksheet while we learn about agriculture and sustainable agriculture practices in the world. And I'm going to guess that a lot of you don't know a lot about farming and about food production because you're city folk living in a suburb. But we are going to talk about today where our food comes from, how it's grown, and how this is going to be a huge issue for the future for humanity. As the planet gets warmer, where are we going to be able to keep our food growing, and which countries are going to be facing food insecurity, not enough food, actually, and not enough water to grow their food. So let's start first with just some general observations of who's getting food, who's not, and what are people eating? So we're going to look at this food subsistence pattern. And I just want you to jot down some general observations. What do you notice? So dark blue in this map for daily caloric consumption. Where you see dark blue, those people are getting 3,000 to almost 4,000 calories a day. So when you're writing down some observations, what do you see? Look for your UN country right now. What do you notice? How much food are you getting per day? And think about like how hungry you are maybe right now. Like how would it be to go about your day and do your business and do your school if you were only getting, like right here at the Democratic Republic of the Congo here, is only getting 1,800 calories a day on average. So look at some observations here. Look at like your UN country, look and see who's getting lots of calories and who's not, and maybe start to wonder why. Now, you hear here in the United States a lot of discussion about our sugar consumption. We do have a sugar consumption problem. As we go into the next map, you're going to make some observations here of where our calories come from, and if they're coming from sugar, how many calories. So it says there dark purple are over 600 calories per person per day of sugar. And that sugar consumption is leading to a obesity epidemic in our country, health issues, diabetes, heart disease. So where in the world, look for your UN country right now and look and see what color is it. Is it less than 100? That would probably be ideal because sugar kind of hits our bodies kind of like a poison. So some of these countries here that don't even have access to sugar, I'm sorry, this thing's in the way right now. That would be better. I'm sorry, if I can see if I can get that down. Exit. There we go. Does that help? No. Sorry, let's try this again. See if that, it's not dropping out of the way. I'm sorry, I don't know how to get that out. No, that's not going to work either. Okay, well, let's just go to the next one. So after we looked at sugar and we made some sugar observations, oh, see, there it is without my thing. Okay. Next, meat protein consumption. So I am going to be sharing a little bit about our confined animal feeding operations, which is how we produce our meat in North America. But I want you to check out and look at, again, color-coded map, who's getting meat, as in like hamburger, pork, that type of meat. Like who's eating beef and then who's not. And write down some observations that you notice, or look at your UN country. I notice on this map that the United States, again, is eating a lot of meat. We seem to be the winner for the sugar consumption. And then for meat consumption, it says 103 to 137 kilograms. So that's in metrics. So let's look at pounds. How many pounds is that? I want you to write down right underneath 275 pounds per person per year. So I'm just trying to think about all of the meat in my colon, and it kind of grosses me out. That's Denmark, New Zealand, Luxembourg, and Cyprus happen to all have a speed. And so does Spain. So kind of interesting. Now, meat as being one of our main go-to proteins, we'll discuss how that is contributing to global warming. actually, and that'll be later in my presentation. Let's look for the next observations. This is just per person per year, just again looking at graphics. Japan eating not quite as much meat as the United States, although that's changing. The trend around the world is to eat more meat. That's seen as like you've really made it. You're a winner. You are successful and wealthy if you can afford meat. That's why even McDonald's in other countries runs a little more expensive. To eat meat is seen as a luxury item. So what do you eat if you don't eat meat for your protein? This is fish protein consumption. And so I want you to look at your UN country and see, is that the main source of your protein? What observations do you see? Which countries are dependent upon fish? And so then if you tie that into sustainability, in order to have your fish healthy, you need healthy oceans. You need oceans without pollution. You need oceans where you're not going to have mercury getting into that fish, because then what you eat is what that animal ate. So we want our fish to be healthy if that's going to be a major source of food for countries. And so when we're worried a little bit about populated areas being tied to the ocean, if the ocean isn't productive in protein, then those populations, those large populations that depend on fish, will be suffering. Let's look at the next one. So who is suffering? Who has food insecurity? So you may not be able to make out what countries those are. I noticed that I see Mongolia, I see Tajikistan. I know that that is the shape of Ethiopia. That's Mali. I know that is Bolivia. And so you may make some observations here that landlocked countries tend to have more food insecurity. That means they're not really getting the calories that the other countries are for their daily economics. Like, to be a productive country, you need to be fed enough so that you have good workers. Let's look at one more. Just for FYI, let's look at and this I thought was interesting, just as a graphic of, you can see, remember how I said that the beef consumption has been rising, and chicken has been rising, turkey's been about the same, and pork's been about the same. Let's look at alcohol consumption. And your last observations, where do you notice in the world lots and lots of alcohol consumptions? Over 13 liters per capita would be the dark colors. So look for your UN country. What do you notice? Are you very little in alcohol consumption? Something that I notice here is a lot of these countries right along Southwest Asia are Muslim countries. And if you practice Islam, that's one of your tenets, is that you would avoid alcohol. So I noticed that with my observation. So we are going to be looking quickly at then how is food grown, and how does your UN country grow its food? Is it really labor intensive, or is it done with machines? So I'm going to come out of this PowerPoint and into this one, and let's check this out. Notice in your worksheet, you are just responsible for writing where in the world is this type of farming practice, food production happening. So when we get into this, we'll have to start first with just what's the difference between subsistence farming and commercial farming. So when I'm showing you some subsistence farming methods, that's just, you're working all day just to subsist, just to exist. That your family is all about growing your food for your family all day, and that you're lucky if you could maybe just get enough to get by. So your days are spent really producing your dinner. And the majority of the world, this is how they're getting by, subsistence farming. Now, we live in a developed nation, so we depend on commercial agriculture. We have machines and large factory farms produce our food, and that frees us up with more time to do other economic adventures. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand what's the difference between subsistence and commercial. So let's look at the first one, subsistence farming, that you're doing just for your family. Where is that done? Well, we are seeing that these subsistence agricultural plots are definitely around the equator. So I want you to write down equator. To get your farm, notice that you burn down trees. That burn down little patch is called a swidden. And then that has a lot of nitrogen that goes into the soil after you burn away the forest, and then you can farm there. But you can only farm there for a couple of years, so then you have to burn down more parts of the forest. So when we're talking about global warming and carbon going into the atmosphere, much of that carbon is because the people that are living there right at the equator are burning the forests so that they can have food, so that they can have a farm. So in your notes, subsistence farming, you're going to write along the equator, and a shifting swidden subsistence type of farming are in those low latitudes. So you could also write down for the second box, the tropics, where it's humid and we have very low latitudes around the equator is where people are doing this type of farming. Okay, let's look at the next picture for intensive subsistence. Now, you might have seen these before. This is called a terraced hillside. And intensive subsistence farming is done in places like Vietnam. You could write East or South Asia. And then think about it, like, why would you need that terrace? It's to create actually more land, because if you're living on a hillside, you don't have a lot of flat land to grow your farms. But if you cut into the hillside, you get more flat land. So that explains why it's almost like stair steps and you farm the heck out of it. That's why it's called intensive. You are farming a ton just to get a little bit of food. And so intensive subsistence farming, again, you're farming just for your family, but you're probably mostly farming local crops, and rice is done in this type of way. Subsistence agriculture, lots and lots of people on that land, just farming the heck out of it. Okay, so then the fourth one down, pastoral nomadism subsistence. Let's look and see if this is your UN country. Your pastoral subsistence farming is where you kind of cruise around with your animals and you follow the herd. And this is done in Mongolia and in Nepal and in the highline region, or the high regions of Peru. So you have your llamas, or you have your yaks, or you have your buffalo or your goat herds, and you move them to where they've got new grassland and you follow them. And you only eat that animal if it's like sick or dying. You mostly subsist off the milk of that animal, because if you killed it, then you can only eat it once. But if you have the milk, then you can have that milk again and again and again. So milk and butter and cheeses is what they're subsisting on for some of their subsistence meals. So again, those are in highlines of like Nepal, Mongolia, and Peru. Pastoral nomads. North Africa also practice this with goats, and in the Middle East with sheep and goats, and in Central Asia. It's also referred to as transhumance, because you're having to move around based on the seasons so that your animals can eat what's growing and where it's growing. So this is called pastoral nomads. So then next one, commercial agriculture. Is your country like a stage 4 developed country? Well, then you're probably participating in commercial agriculture. And what that means is, rather than your populace growing the food, you have farmers growing the food for you, and then you go buy it in a market. So commercial agriculture, or agribusiness, in the United States is definitely what we were known for the last 100 years. We've really, I don't know if you've heard us called the breadbasket of the world. We've produced a lot of grain, and then we can give that grain to the cows, and then the cows can eat that grain, and then those cows poop, but that poop provides fertilizer. So it's kind of like a closed system. It's all like kind of the circle of life here. Commercial agriculture is in our corn belt or in Iowa. But if you take that latitude and you go over into Russia and China, they also have commercial agriculture and mixed crop and livestock. So this is allowing our countries, China, Russia, the United States, to have large populations alive. Because think about like what you eat. It's mostly corn based or wheat based or meat based, which that's coming from this region. So this is called mixed crop agriculture. Mixed crop agriculture. Europe participates in this too. Lots and lots of dairy come out of mixed crop livestock commercial. So for that, you would write down North America, Russia, China, and the same with mixed crop and livestock commercial. Europe would work. All right, then dairy. So why do the Green Bay Packers have a big piece of cheese on their head for that football team? Well, because that is a region of the world that's focused on dairy. So production of milk is usually done with a dairy farm where you keep all the cows kind of concentrated together so that they can eat and enjoy their grass, and then you can get their milk and their dairy right there. Cheese. So whereas it's done like Wisconsin, up in Michigan, and again in the Netherlands, and Holland is known for its cheese. So those are some places that kind of focus on dairy, but a commercial production of dairy, not like the nomads. Right? Then grain. So I talked about it being the breadbasket. Grain, if you've ever done a big road trip out to Nebraska, you've just seen tons and tons of cornfields and wheat fields. And so that whole area of Nebraska, Kansas, and then if you take that same latitude, because food kind of grows in a certain latitude of the world, you could keep following that across. And in Russia and in China, they also produce grain. And that is a big staple of keeping a large population alive. But we use really cool machines to do it. There's a Ukraine, Russia. Right, then Mediterranean. So Mediterranean crops are grown around the Mediterranean. And ironically, this is supposed to be like the best diet for keeping you alive the longest, is to live on wine and nuts and olives and good oils and fish. Like that's supposed, and the vegetables that grow around here. So that's supposed to be a really healthy lifestyle. We find that people in Sardinia, for instance, are living the longest on the planet, and partly their diet has to do with that. So right around the Mediterranean, look for your UN country. Are you enjoying a Mediterranean diet? Where is that grown? Around the Mediterranean. And California, actually, because California has a similar climate. And, one of the last ones here is livestock, commercial agriculture. Oh, I don't know if I had a place for that. I don't think I do. Sorry. Commercial truck farming, that's kind of like what goes on around here, like those farmers markets. And that's usually in like an urban area where you go and buy fresh produce, but you live in an urban area. So like here. So I don't have a box for that, so you can skip that. Livestock ranching, though, this is definitely what we do in Colorado and out in Utah and down in Texas. So you could write down like the West of the United States does livestock ranching, but so does Argentina and places that have large tracts of land so the cows can roam around. And remember when I showed you that movie about burning down forests for palm oil? Well, there also is a trend to burn down forests in Brazil or in Venezuela or in Argentina so that you can start to grow more cows for like McDonald's like industries. So you can write down like Colorado for livestock ranching. It's because the trend is that people want to eat a lot of meat. And plantation crops, skip the green revolution there and go down to the bottom. Plantation crops are called luxury crops because people are willing to pay a lot of money for them. I love coffee. I am willing to pay a ton of money for my coffee. I also talked about palm oil being a luxury crop because people really here in the United States love their junk food. And palm oil is an essential ingredient for that. But there's also luxury crops like bananas or mangoes, or lately, oh my gosh, avocados. Avocados has actually led to like gangs that are controlling the avocado trade down in Mexico. It's fascinating that you could like have a gang, and corruption around a food industry. The mafia controls the olive oil industry in Italy. Like, who knew? Isn't that crazy? So, LDCs, less developed countries, are where these commercial crops are grown for the more developed countries. So we're kind of using those less developed countries because they really need the money to grow our luxury items, and then we buy those luxury items. So even like cocaine, I know that's horrible that the United States buys so much cocaine, but cocaine is a luxury item grown in Colombia, and then we buy that cocaine, which is horrible. Yeah, gross. So why is this all tied to climate change? Because as we have a warming planet, some of those places that these crops grow are changing. And as their climate changes, the crop isn't going to grow there anymore. And then if you don't have food, you don't have people. So we're really going to have to rethink how to get water to the places that need water for our agricultural production to keep our population alive. Now I'm going to pause for a second and make sure that I can pull up the next thing that we are going to watch together. So give me just a second to pause. Okay, so the next thing that I was going to show you is commercial agriculture. So skip right now the GMOs, the genetically modified organisms. There's 2 videos that you're going to watch when I'm done on your own, looking for pros and cons of GMOs. But let's go to where it says a CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation. And we're going to look for 5 positives of having CAFOs and mechanized agriculture. And then we're going to watch a fun little movie at looking at some negatives. So I want to show you how cool commercial agriculture is here in the developed nation. So we use a ton of machinery. So you could write down number 1, machines. That's an argument for CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations. When we are growing our meat, we use super cool machines that take the place of lots of people. So we can do the work with less people. We're really efficient, and we have awesome machines to pick our corn and handle our animals and do all of this agriculture with a lot of machinery. Super cool. Look at that. That's like sucking up grapes. How cool is that? So then, using this machinery, this brings you to the second awesome positive of a CAFO, a concentrated animal feeding operation, is we can use those machines to feed us. So this is a cow hooked up for milking. And so for number 2, you would write down, we can feed a large population because we can hook up that cow and really get it going. And then we've got a ton of milk to give a large population of people. Okay. So machines, large amount of people. You could write down, it doesn't take many people to run this place because you just need to be able to hook up the cow, right? And this is awesome. This is similar to up in northern Colorado, where the cows come in and then they get on this like merry-go-round, and that's their milking station. So if you know anything about cows, they've got to be milked a couple times a day. So they hop into that little merry-go-round and they get milked, and then when it's time to get off the merry-go-round, then they're done being milked. And this is crazy. There's all this methane, they're like cow gas that comes out, and they can actually harness the cow gas, cow farts, and run the facility on the natural gas. Is that like mind blowing or what? It's running on methane. Now, here's some downsides. If I pop over to the other side for the CAFO, is that there's a lot of disease when you put all of those animals in tight quarters. The poo is going to get on each of them. So they have to go through kind of an antibiotic bath before they go to slaughter to make sure that they get some of those poo bugs off of them. A positive is that your farms don't need to be very big because you can just shove all of the cows together to have more space. So you actually can save on farm size with a CAFO, with a confined animal feeding. So see here, you can see all these cows are all shoved together, and they're not going to be living like that for very long because we feed them with antibiotics with hormones so that they grow faster. So usually I think it takes a couple years for a cow to be an adult cow, but we can grow an adult cow in 6 months with hormones. So that allows you to just have them on that small amount of space. And those farm sizes can be really big if you have like a huge CAFO. There's a really huge CAFO up in Greeley, and when the weather changes, when we have an inversion and we're about to have snow, we can smell it. That's kind of what you're smelling. But what is another positive, because you have to have 5 positives for a CAFO? Machines, large amount of people. Doesn't take a lot of people to run this, but you get to feed a lot of people. Meat, we just get meat, and lots of people like meat. So that's a positive. In fact, we like our meat so much that we have CAFOs for chickens, for turkeys, for fish. We keep fish actually in farms. This is how our eggs are produced. And so these are all called factory farms. Now, we've taken this to a science, and just beware that some of the next slides I show you are like, whoa, like kind of frightening. But commercial agriculture, because we have to have so much food produced, we've got to be really thoughtful about the food that we're producing and make sure that we get the most meat off the animal and that we can do it year round. So we're starting to breed cows so that just the tasty parts are the what's on the cow. So no more lean cows. We want fat cows. In fact, fat cows take a lot of corn to make because you get really fat when you eat a lot of corn. So like there's a cow that has been bred so that it's tastier. And you have to use a lot of chemicals. So this, I guess, would be a negative for a CAFO, is with so many cows together, there could be a lot of diseases that could kind of grow amongst them. So we got to make sure we use a lot of chemicals to keep those diseases down. And sometimes those chemicals can get into our food. And then there's a problem with the poo. Another argument against CAFOs is the poo can start to leach into the groundwater. So when you hear about E. coli outbreaks in a field where the crops have been tainted, it's usually because of animal poo, as that water has tainted those crops. There's also listeria that is a problem that can come from cow poo into our crops. So these were some positives and negatives, but now you're going to watch a cute video on more of the negatives. So I was trying to show the positives, and I want you to see this cute one called the matrix. And the matrix, and the matrix is based on the matrix. Sorry, I wanted you to see the video, but not have it actually playing while I'm talking. So this is Morpheus, and they're going to be talking about like the red pill versus the blue pill, and it's like a takeoff on that cute Matrix movie with Keanu Reeves. So this is how long is this video? This video is, look, 3 minutes and 46 seconds. So I want you to pause me, watch this cute video, and then you're going to come back. Okay. So I'll see you in just a second. Okay, I hope you like that. I thought that was super, super cute. So you should have had some of the negatives of a CAFO, like animal welfare, disease, antibiotics, the water quality, the greenhouse gases are contributing to our climate change. But the next topic that we're going to watch a couple movies for is the idea of genetically modified organisms called GMOs. So to produce food for a large population, we have to tweak our food. And by tweaking it, we alter it with science. So for this first video, this is a negative, it's actually super sarcastic. This GMO a go-go is against GMOs, but they're actually pretending that they're for GMOs. So they're being sarcastic in this. And so I don't want you to watch all 9 minutes of this. I only want you to watch 4 minutes and 25 seconds. And what you are going to find out as you watch this cute little cartoon is that there are some concerns about GMOs as far as their safety and messing with Mother Nature and the cross pollination and maybe allergies that come out of eating GMOs. But the good news is that the science says they're safe. So you are going to listen to the science guy for the positives for GMOs. So this is arguments for tweaking our food scientifically. And he's going to tell you about how they haven't really proven that GMOs are dangerous and that they help us reduce pests, they help us produce more food, and it's what allows for a large population to exist. So 4 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that. So it's going to take you about 10 minutes to get your arguments for and against GMOs. And that brings you to the end of your worksheet. Here is final observations. I'd like you to write down a few sentences about 2 things you've learned through this presentation. And before you do, you might like to watch this cute little commercial about Chipotle. Chipotle has really tried to create fast food that is sustainable because the way we produce our food needs to be able to sustain humanity on this planet, all 7.5 billion of us. So in this cute video, it's called Back to the Start. Again, it's a cute little cartoon. It talks about how this farmer was doing commercial ag practices, but then kind of got grossed out on how mechanized it is and was worried about the welfare of animals. And is there a way that we could move towards organic practices, which is what Chipotle is trying to do? And it's interesting because Chipotle used to be owned by McDonald's, and it's really trying to change the way it grows food for a better planet. So that is all I have about the ag production. Tomorrow in class, we're going to be making a map about your UN country and trying to identify what agricultural practices your UN country uses. Does it use the swidden, and does it burn down the forests? And is that just using those tiny little plots of land? Is it doing pastoral nomadism, or is it doing commercial ag? What type of food do you eat? Are you a beef country, chicken? Are you not much food country? And then we're going to look up what agricultural products your country produces. Are you one of those countries that produces tropical crops and you're being kind of used by the more developed countries? And then we'll look at farming practices, just what I think I said that already. So consumption, agricultural products, farming practices, and we'll decorate a map for that. So that's all I have. Can you please watch those 2 GMO videos? Check in on the cute little Chipotle video if you want, write your observations and upload your notes. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.